convinced himself he didn't need her. That his life was better untouched by foreign ways. But now, each step he took seemed to lead him deeper into doubt. The nights felt colder, the land felt whiter, and loneliness followed him like a shadow. The morning sun painted the savanna in golden hues as Shabba made his way across dry grasslands. His bow was slung over his shoulder, but his heart wasn't in the hunt. He wasn't sure if he was searching for food, a path forward, or something else entirely. Then, suddenly, he stopped. A presence. A shift in the air. His instincts sharpened as he looked ahead. There, in the clearing, stood a massive lion, a powerful beast, its golden mane illuminated by the sunlight. Its deep amber eyes locked onto Shabba, unblinking, unreadable. But it wasn't just the lion. Around it, other animals had gathered. A few gazelles stood frozen in place. A small group of hyenas lingered in the distance. Birds circled above. It was as if the entire wilderness had stopped to watch. Shabba had faced wild animals before, but this was different. The lion did not roar. It did not charge. It simply watched him. The silence was overwhelming. Shabba's heart pounded. He had grown up in these lands, he had hunted, he had fought. But now, standing before the king of the wild, he felt something he had never felt before. Powerless. He wasn't afraid of death. That wasn't what made his legs feel weak. It was something deeper, something in the lion's gaze, something in the way the world had stopped around them. It was as if the lion was waiting for something. Waiting for him to decide. The battle within. Shabba swallowed hard. "Why are you here?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. The lion exhaled through its nose, a deep rumble in its chest. It did not move, did not growl, did not threaten. It was simply there, watching him. Shabba clenched his fists. Was this a sign? A message from the spirits? Had he strayed too far from his roots? Or was this a test, one last challenge before he could understand what he truly wanted? His thoughts were a storm inside him. Should he go back to the village? There, his people waited. His ex-wife, Kazi, had returned, wanting to fix things. She had once been his everything, and maybe, just maybe, they could rebuild what they had lost. Should he search for the European woman? She had shown him a different world, a different way of thinking. She had left, but she had also sent him food, spaghetti, as if she still cared, as if she still wanted him in her life. Or should he keep walking, deeper into the unknown? Maybe his path was not with his people or with the woman from another world. Maybe it was something else, something he had yet to discover. Shabba had never felt so torn. The lion blinked slowly, then turned its head slightly, as if giving him permission to move. The spell was broken. The animal stirred. The world around him started to breathe again. Shabba took a deep breath. He had to choose. But what was the right choice? A new path. For the first time in his life, Shabba felt lost, not in the land, but within himself. He had always known who he was, a Hadzabe man, a hunter, a son of the wild. But now, doubt crawled into his heart. He missed her. The European woman. He hated to admit it, but he did. He missed her laugh, her curiosity, the way she had looked at him like he was something special, something more than just another man of the savannah. But he also knew he could not change who he was. He could not become a man of cities, of hotels, of clothes that did not belong to him. Then there was Kazi, his past, his old life. She was there, waiting for him, hoping for another chance. But was she waiting for the Shabba of the past? Or the man he had become? Shabba looked at the lion one last time. Maybe the lion wasn't here to give him an answer. Maybe it was here to remind him of something he had forgotten. A man must choose his own path. No one, no woman, no village, no foreign land, can choose it for him. With a final deep breath, Shabba turned and began walking. But where? Back to the village? To search for the European woman? Or into the unknown? Only time would tell. The lion had left, disappearing into the golden savanna like a spirit fading into the wind. The moment had passed, but the weight it left in Shabba's heart remained. He kept walking. But to where? Even he wasn't sure. His feet followed an invisible path, guided by nothing but the storm of thoughts in his head. The sun was high now, and hunger gnawed at his stomach. He reached for his pouch, pulling out a few dried berries and chewing them slowly. It reminded him of the time he had shared food with the European woman, how fascinated she was by his way of life, how she had struggled to use a bow, how she had laughed when she failed but tried again. Shabba exhaled, shaking his head. He was not supposed to feel this way. For years, he had been content with the simple life, hunting, living with his people, and knowing exactly who he was. But now? Now he was a man caught between two worlds, the past, the future, the familiar, and the unknown. He had to make a decision. The road back home. By nightfall, Shabba found himself approaching familiar territory. He could see the faint glow of fires from his village in the distance. The sound of distant laughter, the crackling of burning wood, it was all the same, yet it felt different. He stopped. What would happen if he walked back in? Would Kazi still be waiting, hoping for him to take her back? Would his people look at him differently, sensing the change in his heart? Would he be able to pretend like he hadn't been tempted by another world? He crouched beside a tree, rubbing his temples. Then, out of nowhere, a voice broke the silence. Shabba. Is that you? He turned sharply. It was Mosi, one of his closest friends. The young hunter ran toward him, grinning, clapping him on the shoulder. Where have you been, brother? Mosi asked. Kazi has been looking for you everywhere. She's worried. Shabba forced a small smile. I needed time to think. Mosi nodded, understanding. Come, let's go. The elders have been talking about you. And Kazi, he hesitated. She's been waiting. Shabba sighed. He had expected this. Kazi had not given up on him. With a deep breath, he followed Mosi into the village. The ex-wife's return. As soon as he entered the camp, people turned. Some whispered, others simply watched. And then? Shabba. Kazi. She rushed toward him, eyes filled with emotion. Relief, frustration, longing, it was all there. Where have you been? She demanded. I thought you weren't coming back. Shabba studied her face. She was still beautiful, still strong. But something inside him had changed. He no longer saw her as he once had. I needed time, he said simply. Kazi searched his eyes, her expression softening. I know why you left. I know you've been thinking about her. Shabba's jaw tightened. He didn't respond. Kazi exhaled. She's not here, Shabba. She left. And you and I, we have a history. We have something real. You can't throw that away because of some woman from another world. Shabba looked at the fire, the shadows dancing in its glow. Could he pretend the European woman had meant nothing? Could he erase the feelings that still lingered? Kazi stepped closer. You belong here, Shabba. With your people. With me. The words hung in the air like smoke. Did he? A message from the past. Before he could answer, an old woman's voice interrupted. Shabba. The village elder, Bibi Roka, stood near the fire, her wise eyes studying him. She was the keeper of stories, the one who had guided many before him. Come sit, she said, gesturing to a place beside her. Shabba hesitated, then obeyed. Bibi Roka looked at him, her expression unreadable. Your heart is troubled. Shabba didn't respond. She continued. A man cannot walk two roads at once. If he tries, he will be lost in the middle. Shabba looked down, his fingers tracing patterns in the dirt. You have seen another world, Bibi Roka said. And it has changed you. But you must ask yourself, are you looking ahead? Or are you looking back? Shabba swallowed. I don't know. Bibi Roka nodded. Then listen. Long ago, there was a hunter, much like you. He lived as we do, but one day, he met a woman from a distant land. She showed him things he had never known. He loved her, but he also loved his home. He did not know where he belonged. Shabba's breath caught. What happened to him? The elder's gaze was steady. He hesitated for too long. And in the end, both worlds moved on without him. A heavy silence followed. Shabba clenched his fists. He didn't want to be that man. The decision. That night, Shabba sat alone under the stars, thinking. If he stayed, he would be safe. Kazi would take him back, the village would welcome him, and life would continue as it always had. But deep inside, he knew part of him would always wonder, what if? If he left, he would be chasing the unknown. He didn't even know if the European woman still wanted him. But something inside him whispered that he couldn't ignore what he felt. Mosi approached quietly, sitting beside him. What will you do, brother? Shabba sighed. I don't know. Mosi smirked. You do. You just don't want to say it. Shabba looked at him. Mosi chuckled. You're not the same, Shabba. You've already changed. The question is, will you pretend you haven't? Shabba closed his eyes. When he opened them, he knew his answer. What happens next? Does Shabba stay in the village and try to rebuild his life with Kazi? Does he leave to find the European woman, risking everything for a chance at something different? Or does he walk a different path, neither past nor future, but something entirely new? His journey isn't over yet. The village was quiet that morning, except for the distant sound of children laughing and the crackling of small fires. Shabba sat near the edge of the settlement, staring at the horizon. His mind was restless, his heart heavy. He had spent the night thinking, about Kazi, about the European woman, about the choice he had to make. His people expected him to stay. Kazi wanted him to return to their old life. But deep inside, he couldn't ignore the longing in his heart. Then, suddenly, a sound. A murmur rippled through the village. Voices, footsteps, whispers growing louder. Shabba turned. At the entrance of the village, she stood. The European woman had come back. A foreign woman in a tribal world. The villagers gathered, whispering among themselves. Some looked curious, others suspicious. It was rare for an outsider, especially a foreign woman, to return to their land. She stood there, breathless from travel, her eyes scanning the crowd. And then, she saw him. Shabba. Shabba's heart pounded. He couldn't believe it. She had come back for him. He hesitated for a moment, then stood and walked toward her. Her face was filled with relief, with something deeper, something unspoken. I looked for you, she said, still catching her breath. I didn't want to leave things like that. Shabba studied her. She looked different, stronger, more determined. Why are you here? He finally asked. She exhaled. Because I needed to see you. She stopped, glancing at the villagers staring at them. Kazi stepped forward now, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. She looked between them, then locked eyes with Shabba. So, this is why you've been lost in thought, Kazi said quietly. Shabba didn't answer. He looked at the European woman, then at Kazi. He was truly caught between two worlds now. The confrontation. Kazi studied the European woman, then spoke in a firm voice. Why did you come back? The European woman met her gaze. Because I care about him. A hush fell over the villagers. Some gasped. Others looked at Shabba, waiting for his reaction. Kazi's eyes flickered with something, pain? Anger? Understanding? You care about him? Kazi repeated, her voice calm but edged with emotion. Do you even know what that means? His world is not yours. The European woman didn't flinch. I know. And I don't want to take him away from it. But I also know he's not the same man he was before. Shabba inhaled sharply. She was right. Kazi looked at him now, searching his face. Is that true? Shabba hesitated. He felt everything pressing in on him, his past, his future, the expectations of his people, the pull of the unknown. Shabba, Kazi said softly. You have to choose. The village was silent. The European woman waited. Shabba's heart pounded. Was he ready to decide? What happens next? Fire, does Shabba choose to stay with Kazi and his people? Fire, does he leave with the European woman, stepping into the unknown? Fire, or does he take a different path, finding a way to belong to both worlds? His story is not over yet.
Dani mama nakupa. Dani itaote koche. Tegumbalo. Oh.
Lami.
Waso ina gumbalo kwa. Ika atro kutumika picheketa bikaka wasa amalambo ko nena pipi akko akko bita ishinakuwa ye takuwa amaya gaupe ayam tana amma asina nena bami ichet ozo naka
Lami ba.
Lami ta what